Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the psychology departments. We do this every semester. We have our students present their senior thesis projects, and we only have 3 presentations for you today. I'm Dr. Dawn McQuiston from the psychology department, and as you know, ordinarily we would be doing this live. We do this at the end of every semester in Olin. So thank you for joining us virtually. This is the first time probably that we've ever done this virtually. So we're so excited to share our students' research with you, and we're thrilled that you are joining us today in this format. So 3 presentations that we have for you. Dr. Nowatka's group will go first, and then Dr. Pittman's, and then my group will have a person from each one of those groups sharing their slides with you. If everyone could stay muted, that would be great. After every presentation, we're going to allow a couple of minutes for questions. So go ahead and unmute yourself. I'll give you a little bit of time. If you have any questions, you can also pop a question into the chat function, and I'll pay attention to that. Each presentation is going to be about 12 minutes with a couple of minutes for questions. I think we're ready to get started. We really appreciate everybody joining us today. So first up, we have Dr. Nowatka's group. If someone would like to go ahead and share their slides and get started whenever you're ready.
Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Is everyone in my group here and ready? It's hard to see everyone. Okay.
All right. I am Morgan Burns.
I'm Delaney Irwin.
I'm McConnell.
I'm Margaret Roach.
And I'm Patrick Thornton.
And for our senior thesis project, we studied the relationship of resilience and COVID-19 anxiety and life disruption. As researchers, we felt that the currency, prominence, and severity of the coronavirus deserved our immediate attention. The pandemic is unique in that it exerts widespread and severe impacts on daily life without a certain end date, presents a complex combination of stressors, and blocks access to protective factors. Because the pandemic has the potential to be a threat to mental health, we assess psychological health and well-being of Wofford College students. We define anxiety as an unpleasant emotional state or condition characterized by subjective feelings of tension, apprehension, and worry in relation to COVID-19. It is clear that we have all experienced some level of worry due to the pandemic and the uncertainty. However, past research has found that there is a potential for personal characteristics, such as resilience, that may protect against anxiety. Resilience is a stable trajectory of mental health, or in this case, anxiety, despite exposure to a severe and chronic stressor, the COVID-19 pandemic. The literature on trauma suggests that resilience is actually a fairly common outcome, perhaps even more common than psychopathology. Disruption is defined as stressors in the environment that were caused by COVID-19. An example that many of us experienced as students was getting sent home from school in the spring unexpectedly. We aim to examine resilience and anxiety in terms of a chronic disruptor, the COVID-19 pandemic, and this is the first study to our knowledge to do so.
So with that, we hypothesized that higher levels of perceived life disruption would be related to increased reported anxiety. This was based off a previous study from the Great East Japan earthquake and the effect it had on the mental health of students.
In addition, that resilience would be inversely related to anxiety and disruption, such that higher levels of resilience would be correlated to lower reported anxiety and disruption. This was also based off of the Okuyama Great Eastern Japan earthquake.
Finally, we hypothesized that resilience would moderate the relationship between COVID-19 related disruption and anxiety. That is, we expected that resilient individuals would report low levels of anxiety regardless of the level of disruption they reported. This is based on a prior study that linked high levels of resilience to lower levels of anxiety, as well as moderating the relationship between anxiety and coping methods. Additionally, a study conducted by Yang and colleagues in Wuhan found that resilience was a protective factor against the effects of COVID-19 victimization on college students' mental health.
125 students at Wofford College participated in the study. 76% self-identified as female, 23.2% self-identified as male, and 0.8% self-identified as other.
Our sample underrepresented males when compared to the population of Wofford College students, but was comparable regarding representations of race percentages. 3 scales were used to assess anxiety levels, disruption levels, and resilience levels. For anxiety, we combined the 7-item generalized anxiety scale and 2 items from the coronavirus anxiety scale. Participants were asked to indicate their level of anxiety during the previous 2 weeks. In each item, they were asked to check how often they felt or thought a certain way. It was a 5-point scale that ranged from 0, being not at all, to 4, being severely. The total score was obtained by adding up responses from all questions, and the Cronbach's alpha for this scale was 0.92. For resilience, we used the Connor-Davidson Resilience 10-item scale. The items asked about various ways to overcome stress in one's life, and participants had to indicate how much they agreed with the statements over the previous month. If a particular situation had not occurred recently, participants were asked to answer according to how they thought they would have felt. Each item was scored on a 5-point scale that ranged from 0 to 4. 0 indicated that the resilience statement was not at all true, and a score of 4 indicated that the statement was true nearly all the time. The total score was obtained by adding up responses from all 10 items, so the total could range from 0 to 40 for each participant. Higher scores suggest greater resilience, and lower scores suggested less resilience. The Cronbach's alpha for our resilience measure was 0.82. For disruption, we created our own 13-item scale that asked about disruption in social, financial, health-related, and academic areas of life. Participants checked responses based on the level of disruption they experienced from each aspect at its worst during COVID-19. The scale ranged from 0, being not at all, to 4, being a great deal. The Cronbach's alpha for our disruption measure was 0.84.
Sellers, you're muted.
A Pearson's correlation was used to determine the relationship between disruption and anxiety during COVID-19. There is a significant positive correlation between the 2 variables. The more participants felt their life was disrupted during COVID-19, the more anxiety they experienced, and vice versa. 25% of the anxiety people experience now, they attribute to disruption from COVID-19. 2 other Pearson correlations were used to determine if there was a relationship between resilience and anxiety, and then between resilience and disruption. Resilience and COVID-19 related anxiety were found to be negatively correlated, such that resilience independently accounted for approximately 9% of the total variance in anxiety levels, and resilience and COVID-19 related disruption were found to be negatively correlated, such that disruption independently accounted for 6.5% of total variance in resilience levels. So participants who reported a higher level of resilience also reported lower levels of anxiety and disruption as they relate to COVID-19 pandemic.
To address the second hypothesis, we ran a regression analysis using the disruption levels to predict the levels of anxiety participants felt at the height of COVID-19. We found that disruption levels significantly predicted anxiety levels because F equaled 11.96 and the p-value was 0.001. In a second model, we included resilience in the regression analysis to investigate whether resilience models moderated the relationship between anxiety and disruption. We found that resilience significantly moderated the relationship between anxiety and disruption because F increased to 24.23 and the p-value decreased to below 0.001. We concluded that the second model was a better representation of the data we collected because it demonstrated that when resilience was present in the relationship, there was a smaller difference in anxiety levels between participants with high disruption and participants with low disruption.
Each of our hypotheses were supported by the results of the current study. The strong correlation between disruption and anxiety supports the prior literature that found that greater exposure to disaster events is associated with higher levels of anxiety symptoms. It is possible that the strength of the correlation observed in the current study can be attributed to the prolonged exposure to the effects of COVID-19, as well as the particularly salient effects of the lockdowns for college students, as their academic experiences were heavily affected by COVID-19. The negative correlation between disruption and resilience found in the current study is also supported by the prior literature, and that the majority of people exhibit resilience in the face of potentially traumatic events and follow a standard path of recovery rather than suffering severe negative psychological effects. Additionally, the negative correlation between anxiety and resilience is supported by past literature that has found that high levels of resilience are associated with lower levels of anxiety. These results are also consistent with research about the COVID-19 pandemic that have shown that the faceted effects of the virus have the potential to be anxiety-inducing, ranging from the initial uncertainty about how to prevent the spread of the virus and the social isolation brought on by the lockdowns. Finally, resilience acting as a moderator in our study was consistent with the results of the study conducted by Yang and colleagues, in which resilience was found to be a protective factor against the negative effects of COVID-19 victimization on college students' mental health.
So with that, Wofford students are experiencing high anxiety from COVID. It is also important to note that resilience is inversely related to anxiety and disruption, meaning when people are low in resilience, they experience higher levels of disruption and anxiety. Here, resilience may be seen as a protective factor against COVID. Therefore, Wofford needs to focus on appropriate strategies, therapies, and support groups in order to grow resilience over the course of college. With that brings some limitations. For one, we did not control for individuals previously diagnosed with clinical anxiety. Having pre-existing anxiety could result in individuals reporting anxiety they experience daily rather than COVID-19 related anxiety, therefore skewing the results. We also used convenience sampling as it resulted in an uneven distribution of participants by gender, although race did reflect Wofford's population. This was also a retrospective study, so since participants were asked to report COVID-19 at its worst, they could have misinterpreted the situation by over or underestimating their initial feelings. So with that brings some future directions. Based on the previous results, a future study could tailor resilience strategies to students to decrease levels of anxiety. Wofford could implement strategies in order to reduce anxiety among students. These could be offered through the Wellness Center and be accessible online. Based on the present study's results, a future thesis group could compare the relationship of resilience, COVID-19 related anxiety, and life disruption during the first wave compared to the second wave of COVID-19. Something that could be explored is if post-traumatic growth occurs, which is defined as showing psychological growth post-disaster. Through implementing these strategies, a future thesis group could investigate if resilience is increased in students at Wofford, thereby improving mental health outcomes such as anxiety. This could further see if students are adapting to COVID or if the strategies need to be reevaluated to suit students' needs.
We would like to thank you all for watching, and a special thank you to our advisor, Dr. Nowatka. And now we'll take any questions.
We do have time for questions, so does anybody... Oh, let's do a round of applause first. Let's do that. Does anybody have any questions for this group? Oh, Dr. Lefebvre, yes.
All right, that was a great presentation. Well done. One question I have about the statistics. So in a true mediation model, you have to show that life change or life disruption is related to resilience. Resilience is related to anxiety, and you guys did that. When you did the stepwise regression, you have to show then that life disruption and anxiety are no longer correlated if resilience is the one that's mediating. Did you guys do that analysis to see if mediation, once put into the model, disrupts the relationship between life disruption and anxiety?
We actually did a moderation analysis, and we are still learning about what that means from Dr. Nowatka. That's why you didn't see an actual APA figure on that hypothesis. We did come to the conclusion that we supported our hypothesis because the moderation relationship was more significant than the relationship just between disruption and anxiety without resilience.
Plus, we were evaluating moderation rather than mediation.
All right, Dr. Delaney?
Yeah, hello, everyone. Ramon Galiananis, I'm the Director of Research and Postgraduate Fellowships. I think this is an important and very timely topic. I wanted to ask, you mentioned at one point possible programs to help students build resilience? Would someone talk a little bit more about that?
Morgan, do you want to take it, or I can?
I think this could just look at, so depending just where someone is with resilience, just giving some strategies on how to grow that, whether that's just with support groups or learning from other individuals. So people who are good with dealing with great life disruption, just giving maybe some tips or helpful things. So this could look at a few different forms. And if anyone else wants to add to.
Ramon, there are some online resilience programs. We didn't go into that because we were looking at this connection as a first step, but we probably next fall senior thesis group will be looking at online programming and evaluating some effectiveness. And we are going to send this paper to John Miles and Perry Henson and Boyce Lawton and you if you're interested.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Any more questions? I don't want to miss anybody that might have their hand up. Anybody? Okay. All right. Thank you.